Chris Goodman, thanks for joining me today. You're CMO of KPMG, right. But I think what's interesting is you actually came from Y&R. So let's talk a little bit about that transition from going from the ad agency world essentially to what you're doing now at a professional services firm.
Great. Well, it's kind of interesting. In some ways, the same way I ended up at KPMG in some ways is the way I ended up at Y&R as well. Many years ago, coming out of grad school, I was looking at going into either management consulting or working with big brands, Pepsi's and the Proctors of the world. Ran into a friend of mine who introduced me to Y&R, and more than anything, to kind of get him off my back, I went and interviewed there and blinked and was there, over 20 years. And wow. I think, though I had a few stops along the way after that, it was kind of similar from a KPMG standpoint. I was at Y&R at the time, had received a call from a recruiter telling me about this wonderful opportunity, and as I heard about it, I knew that my next step would be, going back on the client side in a marketing role, but in my mind it was going to be with a sales and marketing driven industry and firm.
Sure.
So as they told me about, KPMG and the Big Four, I said, I really appreciate it. Why don't you send me the job spec and I'll give you some recommendations. And they said, no, we'd like you to pursue it. And I said, well, with all due respect, I've spent some time in professional services. I'm really looking to do something else.
Yeah.
But let me give you some thoughts of people. Well, thankfully, in hindsight, due to a very persistent recruiter, I went and spoke to the folks at KPMG, and I'm thrilled to pieces that I didn't go with my initial instincts, and I've been there a little over a year and a half, and it's been wonderful.
So let's talk about what you brought to
okay.
KPMG. What unique skill set and sort of marketing expertise do you think you brought to the firm that it needed
right.
at the time?
I think to their credit, they were looking to kind of go outside the mold a little bit. So many of the professional services firms have people that have been in the industry for a long period of time. They were willing to take a risk, if you will, on someone that had some experience, but more broadly worked in other industries. So I think what they were looking for that I brought was a couple things. A tremendous amount of non-professional services experience from firms like AT&T and American Express, Colgate, Xerox, a bunch of other ones over the years. So bringing that industry knowledge in terms of how marketing worked in non-professional services firms, I think was one. So the industry expertise, and also someone who is much more deeply grounded in integrated marketing. So admittedly an overused term, but having a pretty deep background in from advertising to digital to PR to events and things like that, traditionally is not where a lot of firms will focus. It's much more maybe either having a partner rotate to kind of look over the function or having someone from the industry. So I think the integrated marketing expertise and quite frankly the non-professional services experience is what they were looking for that ended up being a great fit.
So what was there and is today KPMG's primary brand challenge, if you will?
Well, it's kind of an interesting thought. That was one of the kind of big reasons that I was brought in. I think more broadly, kind of the understanding and belief that while I've had a marketing group for many, many years, that there was a lot more that marketing could do to drive the growth agenda of the firm. As part of that growth agenda, brand was a key part, and for the most part with a lot of professional services firms, they feel the partner is the brand, and in many ways that person is because they're the primary face to the client every day. But there really hadn't been a lot of rigor in terms of looking at brand positioning, brand tracking, brand activation, both internally and externally. And I think it's really that kind of hopefully science and discipline and hopefully creativity that they were looking for with the brand. So we're actually in the process now of doing a tremendous amount of work, everything from higher purpose work, where you hear a lot about purpose-led organizations, to brand strategy, brand tracking, and then ultimately culminating in a brand activation program probably for next year.
So let's talk about your strategy and the ways that you've been able to really get, market and get the brand out there. Talk about methods, in particular the sports sponsorships. Phil Mickelson, for example, is a key sponsor. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think there have been a couple of key programs. I mean, the Phil Mickelson sponsorship that we've had for 2 or 3 years has been an incredible relationship. Phil is just a wonderful human being. He's got a wonderful knack and interest in business. He does a lot outside of golf. So from a chemistry standpoint, it was a perfect fit. And I think what you find many times with sponsorship is sponsorship can be done incorrectly. And by that I mean it's a one-off for an ad, or people will create these deals and never really activate them. And I think what we're doing with Phil, even though it's not big kind of flashy ad campaigns, is we do a lot of work with Phil over the course of the year, very focused with clients, relationship building, and the fruits of that success, their direct marketing and digital programs that are surrounding it. So we've done a lot to kind of leverage that sponsorship with Phil, which is translated into really some strong relationship building programs. And actually last year we had the good fortune to add a second spokesperson to our arsenal with Stacey Lewis. Just started with her at the end of last year, and it's been a wonderful complement to what we do with Phil, and we were thrilled on so many different levels, as well as Stacey getting named as kind of Player of the Year.
That's great.
Which was the first time in 20 years that a U.S. golfer was named that. So those are both kind of critical components of what we do from a sponsorship standpoint.
So you talked a little bit about, you mentioned digital. You know, how are you using some of the new media that is out there, and the way, how is the hyper-connectedness of people impacting how your go-to-market strategy, your attempt to target that decision maker at your prospective client?
I think there's a couple things to it. When I came in a little over a year ago, there were a lot of different things that came up in that first year, including, not surprisingly, taking a look at the team we had, the structure of the team, and there was a lot of work kind of spent on internal plumbing and hygiene issues and all that good stuff. Part of it was actually building a strategic digital capability. We had some folks in there. We've brought in a number of folks from the outside. We've got agency partnerships right now, so part of it was kind of building that base, which we're still building. That said, I'd say probably arguably the most critical channel that we use is thought leadership for any professional services firm, and how we communicate that. And I think what we're seeing now, kind of on steroids, is how we're leveraging the digital channels. And a big project that we're working on is completely rethinking how not just we, but I think in many cases the industry looks at thought leadership. Everything from how you identify those topics to how you develop the content and how you deliver it, which is a long way to your point, is how we're leveraging social media for it, how we're leveraging the various kind of digital channels and doing it hopefully platform agnostic, looking at everything from, again, how we leverage things like LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, things like that, as well as mobile-enabled websites and things like that. So we're looking at it in a lot of different ways, everything from helping drive thought leadership to how we look at events. So it's playing a big role. So we're kind of building the engine or flying the plane as we're changing it a little bit. So we're building and strengthening our capability as we're looking at how we can leverage it across the marketing programs, particularly in the area of thought leadership.
So tell me a little bit about what did you do in your first 100 days on the job?
Yeah, a couple things that I tried to do off the bat, and I think it applies whether you move to a new job with an existing firm or whether you're going to a new firm. It's almost the way, I guess, a political approach to the first 100 days. So, number one was just drinking from the fire hose, full stream immersion, and being what some of the folks in the company refer to as a student of the firm. So it was everything from obviously understanding the entire marketing organization, both onshore and offshore, because we've got a big offshore contingent as well, which is a whole area of operational effectiveness that lots of people are getting into. So one was the immersion. I think two was trying to quickly put together a list of who our star athletes were within that team, where the gaps were, to try to kind of build up the team. And then I think finally, from a strategic standpoint, about providing focus and impact. And it's kind of somewhat trite, but trying to get to the short set of business priorities, mapping our marketing strategy against that, and then determining where we're going to place our big bets from a marketing standpoint. So, immersion, if you will, a lot of focus on the team, developing that strategic plan. So I think a lot of year one for me, and it's tough because as a kind of natural-born marketer and coming from the agency, you immediately want to go into client-facing programs. A big part of year one was budget and process and metrics and organization and things like that that were necessary, but now I'm really excited about year two because a lot of that, we can't declare victory, but now can turn a lot of our focus on the external-facing programs.
So talk specifically about really what you call your micro-marketing strategy in reaching clients.
The focus of a lot of what we do, and I think it's, again, the advertising background where I kind of think in outdoor posters. So if I can communicate it with a simple visual in a couple of words, I've achieved success. So a lot of our focus is on brand relationship and sales, right? And I think in the sales area about driving leads and conversion and things like that, micro-marketing is something that we have now a big focus on. Some people refer to it as account-based marketing or client-centric marketing, but I think, quite simplistically what it is understanding who your key clients are. Again, we focus on the Fortune 1000. It's the C-suite within that, which one might argue is the most over-communicated to time-starved audience on the planet that everybody wants to speak to. So how do you do that? A key component, again, is this micro-marketing, where we segment our clients, understand those key accounts, and then are effectively developing integrated marketing plans to deliver an account plan on a particular piece of business. So,
okay, so it's really customized per client. Per
exactly. It
client,
literally
obviously.
is that micro, trying to, one, how do we build the reputation of KPMG with that individual client, based on their issues? What are the, 20 key relationships that we have to build? And then finally, based on their issues, what are the major programs that we can drive to help drive, their business and also our own? So it's a critical part of what we're doing from a marketing standpoint. A lot of times what you see, particularly in professional services, and I'll speak for our own firm, we're not going to be able to outspend a lot of our competitors, because it's not just the big four, it is for audit, but when you get into advisory, it's IBM, Accenture, McKinsey. So we have to really look at hopefully outsmarting them with hopefully our insights, the programs we build, and I think this micro-marketing piece of it will be a key component of that.